Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg, and you're listening to It's Okay to Be Old, a show about all things aging well. Well, March is National Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, and this time around, I really wanted to talk to someone who was faced with colon cancer, survived, and is thriving. My guest today is Greg Schwem, and he's a corporate comedian and motivational humorist. He's also a Chicago Tribune columnist, best-selling author, and colon cancer survivor. Welcome, Greg.
Welcome, Patricia. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I always like to talk about how I met my guests because this is a forum for friendship,
Yes,
friendship
it
and
is.
community. And I was doing It's Okay to Be Old in Chicago, and I had a little gig on WGN to talk about our event and my book. And Greg was there to talk about what he's doing. And we met in the green room and swapped numbers and swapped pictures. And it took me almost 6 months to get him on here. So I'm so thrilled you're here, and the timing couldn't be better with Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So, Greg,
Right.
let's jump in and please tell us your story.
Yeah, well, how we met was I was actually after you went off of WGN, I was coming into the studio to talk about a benefit, a stand-up comedy benefit that I had organized on behalf of the Colorectal Cancer Alliance. So, I have been a full-time stand-up comedian for over 30 years. Yeah, I know, but still making a living at it and making and still people out there wanting to laugh. And I mostly do private dates for big corporations, business conferences. I've added cruise ships. I still do some clubs. And I had in 2024, I had kind of a sort of a 1-2 punch. I became what they call a gray divorcee, which is someone who gets divorced after 50, and that is a rising demographic. And then while I was going through that, yes, I did get diagnosed with colon cancer. So I was dealing with those things simultaneously. The divorce is now final. I have a great bill of health, and I really learned to kind of practice what I'd been preaching. I had to, which was, no matter what you're going through in life, you can find something within that, within that episode, within that part of your life to laugh at. And I realized it was almost, I don't want to say it was sounding hypocritical in a way, but here I'd been doing it, and I was like, I've never had to do this, and now I did. And a lot of the material that I wrote during that time has made its way into my stand-up act on stage, talking to corporate groups and saying, you can do this too. Look at me. And I ended up with a book about it as well. So yeah, lot going on in the last 2 years.
So I have a couple questions, just I think is relevant to how we deal with things. How old were you when you discovered you had colon cancer?
I was 62.
And how did you feel when you got that news?
Well, it was like,
If I recall, when we chatted, you didn't have symptoms. You went for a routine
yeah,
exam, right?
exactly. Yeah, and they found a tumor. I was actually 61. How did I feel? I guess I felt like, what else could go wrong right now? Because again, the divorce was, as people who get divorced know, you think it's going to be quick, and it never is. No matter what your relationship is with your soon-to-be ex-spouse. I mean, things happen.
Mhm.
So was going through all that, and then when this came in, I was just like, how am I going to deal with this? Plus, I was still working. I mean, I had gigs, I had dates on the books, and I had to figure out how I was going to balance that as well. So I think that was really what I said, was just now, not that there's ever a good time to get cancer, but but that was really not a good time.
And so you were obviously blindsided because there was no symptoms. There was no
Right.
reason for you to feel that anything was wrong. And did you were you in disbelief? Did you question the doctors? Did you say this can't be happening to me kind of feeling
I
or
didn't question them. I was prepared for it because I had gone in for a colonoscopy, and he said, I'm seeing something I don't like, and I'm gonna let my partner know about it. But I think I was in a little bit of shock because I had done a home screening, and I think just 4 months before that, maybe 6, and that came back clear, and they said, you're good for 3 years. So had I not gone in for my 10-year colonoscopy, who knows
Right.
what might have happened and where I'd be now.
Right. And that's why there's a lot of divine intervention in so many things that we do.
Yeah.
And I love that you spend your life, Greg, making other people laugh. That is so critical. It's cliche, but laughter is the best medicine. And you use humor to get through some of your own personal, really rough patches, as well as helping other people. So how did you incorporate that into your own journey?
Yeah. I mean, okay. I decided, as a comedian, you are constantly on the lookout for funny things. I'm always listening. I'm watching. I'm observing strangers, probably to the point where maybe it might look a little creepy. It is not my intent, but to me, the funniest material, and this is a little cliche as well, but it's what goes on around you. It's your personal experience and so forth. And as difficult as it sounds, I was determined to, first of all, I thought to myself, I'm lucky they caught it early. This is just a little blip. It's a little speed bump, a little bit, and I'm going to be fine. And I thought, I can use this. I can use this when I get back to my profession, and to make other people laugh at it. And it wasn't like, nurses were walking into my room and I'm like, hey, let's all have some fun here, because that's hardly it. But I was more of sort of a passive observer as to what people around me were doing. And then I would write that down. And that's really how comedians write material too. We see what other people are doing, and then we formulate it into what we think is going to make it appealing to an audience.
I'm one of those medical show junkies. I love the interesting diagnosis and the medical stories, and I'm always juggling that with what goes on in real life. And there's a lot of dark humor among health professionals and medical professionals because it's their way of coping as well.
Absolutely.
You find in the process of the diagnosis and the surgeries and the aftercare, did you find that the medical staff were able to laugh with you, if you will? Did you find them to be open to humor and uplifting, or were they clinical?
Yeah, no, they were very much open to it. I mean, think of who an oncology unit sees all day. Think of a typical, I mean, it's just room, every room you go into, somebody has cancer. Okay. So that ain't exactly a fun occupation. But I'll tell you, the first thing that I realized there was that these people had senses of humor too, was when I first met my surgeon, and he told me where my tumor was, and it was right at the bend of my colon. So I said to him, I go, maybe a dumb question, but how are you going to attach, you're taking out the right angle. Yeah. So how are you going to attach this to this? And he looks at me and he goes, it's why they pay me the big bucks. Yeah. And he started laughing and I started laughing, and we were kind of off to the races. I mean, that didn't mean that, every time I went to see him, it was going to be joke, joke, joke. But I was like, okay, this is a guy I like. This is a guy I can relate to, because he uses a little bit of humor in his practice.
Mm-hmm. And same with the nursing staff. I'd imagine everybody around them was very, people do this all day long, like you say, and they see it all day long, and they have a special gene in them that really that they can tolerate it and they can be there for you. It's a very very special person that does that.
Yeah. And I think that nurses have to learn how to, quote unquote, read the room. So when they walk into a room, they have to see, there were times when I was sitting up in bed and was like, boy, that was easy. When am I going home? And, kind of joking with them and what they do and so forth. And then they might come back in an hour, and I was a combination of in tears, frustrated, hurting, all of those things. So I'm hardly in a laughing mood then. But they know when you can have some fun, for lack of a better word, and when you have to be serious or compassionate or whatever. And I picked up on that right away.
did you need a healing time? And I don't mean just physically, because obviously, but did you need an emotional, personal healing time from post-surgical to when you could get back up and be funny again and actually
Mhm.
stand in front of people? Was that something frightening to you, or was
It
that
really wasn't. I wanted to get back out there as fast as possible because I felt like I was so lucky. I was much luckier. I didn't need chemo. I didn't need radiation. They said possibly, and then they said, no, you don't. And right then I'm like, okay. Did I feel sorry for myself when I came home after a few days in the hospital? I did. I did. And I think that's normal. But once I realized that was the hard part was over, then you say, okay, now it's time to get out and get back to doing what I do best and what I love to do.
now this brings a whole new level of poop and fart jokes, right? I mean, everybody hates, oh, it's vulgar, don't tell, but the truth is everybody laughs about it, right?
Yeah, right.
Everybody laughs at those kind of jokes, from vomiting to farting to pooping to diarrhea.
Yep. Yep.
It's so
Exactly.
graphic and we all say ew, but the truth is everybody laughs about it, right?
Right. Right. And
So
that's the thing about humor.
yeah,
It's related. You want to joke about things that are relatable,
yes,
and you might not. It might be disgusting and gross, but anybody who's had a colonoscopy knows what is involved, and
right.
you might as well just laugh at it and don't compare yours with anybody else's because they're all
Absolutely
equally disgusting, and yours is no worse.
right. We're going to talk further on in the show about the charity work you're doing, but it's funny you brought that up, and let's talk about this for a second.
Mhm.
Please, Greg, you and I together. I always say all my guests are my partners, in getting information out. I tell people, say, well, the prep is gross. I'm like, you know what? If something's wrong, the prep is nothing
Yeah.
compared to what you need to do. So
Yeah.
and it is graphic. What happens is you drink something that tastes disgusting. There's a multitude of ways of doing it, but it cleans your digestive system out so the doctors can see what they need to see.
Right.
And don't overthink it. Like I always say, it's one day of liquid. Do the overnight and the colonoscopy. If I'm not, was it 20 minutes max, right? In and out.
I think so.
Yes, it's like,
I was out of
yeah.
it. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty. It's quick.
the
20,
whole
30 minutes.
ordeal is less than 2 hours from door to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tell everybody, and if you have the slightest inkling, even if a previous test came out okay, if something's going on, please, 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 please address it. Don't be
Mhm.
embarrassed because it's your tushy. A lot of people are embarrassed of that, especially older people.
Yeah.
The world is very free now, but those of us in our 60s and 70s, didn't really grow up with that same kind of open freedom, and we're a little more embarrassed and ashamed of that.
Mhm.
So it's so important to understand these tests. They do them day in, day out, all day long. They think nothing of it. It's very, very simple. And if you're at any risk for anything, they're on it. I mean, this is a very, very, very routine procedure nowadays. And I,
Yeah,
you know,
it
tell
is. It is.
people,
If it's
yeah,
caught early, it is just what you said. It's just so easily treatable. And if it's not caught early, it is not pleasant. And also, I mean, your audience is, people, baby boomers and Gen Xers and so forth. But really, um, people in their 30s, in their 20s, really need to realize that this is not a disease that affects their parents or their
right.
grandparents because the number of cases among people in the Gen Z and the millennial demographic are rising at a very rapid pace. And in fact, I hosted an event last year and I met somebody who was in stage 4 and he was 28.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your book, Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines, A Comedian's Journey Through Cancer, Divorce, and Other Hilarious Stuff, says it all. Great title.
Thank you.
I encourage, available on Amazon, I take it.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how was it for you to put your story to paper and have lots of people read about it? That makes you an open book, literally and
Right,
figuratively,
right,
right?
yeah. I wanted there were, a lot of times I've written other books, and when I sit down to write a book, it's because I write material that I think is funny, but that maybe I can't translate into the stage or onto the stage. Maybe it's just too long, it's too detailed. I mean, one of the things about doing stand-up comedy live is audiences have changed, and they want their entertainment to be much quicker than maybe it was in the past. So I thought, I'm also a humor columnist. And I thought, well, maybe I should just write this down in long form. And maybe I can come up with a few nuggets within there that I can bring onto the stage with me. But really, I think I had planned to write a book about gray divorce before the cancer diagnosis because of what we just said. It is a very fast growing topic.
Right.
And I thought, that would be the structure of the book, is just what it's like to all of a sudden, in this age, all of a sudden, just everything is new to you. You just having to start over at that age, and that's a very scary proposition. So when I got the cancer diagnosis, then I thought, okay, well, now that gives the book even another component, or makes it take a little bit of a right turn, because as I said, now I got two things I'm dealing with. But I found writing to be very therapeutic, to put my thoughts down. I was alone a lot, and that's really a good time to write, is when you're just sort of lost in your own thoughts.
When you came home after the surgery and the recovery, did you have somebody to care for you, or someone to come into your home, or did you really pull this off alone?
I had a sibling who flew in
Okay.
for the surgery and stayed while I was in the hospital. Once they released me, she left, and I did have somebody that I had met and was checking in on me. But for the most part, I did come home to an empty condominium, and was told, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. And it was mostly what you cannot do,
Right.
at least for the first week or so. So yeah, good question. And yeah, a lot of it was just kind of being in myself.
Which can be therapeutic and eye-opening and
It can be.
helpful in some ways, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think
Mhm.
so. I think everybody, it's just like when you're going through a divorce. Everybody wants to check in on you, how you doing and so forth, which is great. I mean, I relish that, but sometimes you just want to say, okay, thank you. And now I'm going to just be by myself for a little bit. I think what you don't want to do is don't let that happen too much, because if you're by yourself, if that's all you do. I mean, in my book, I talked about what it's like to go through an entire day and never speak to another person.
Mhm.
And that happened to me a few times.
Mhm.
And it's not something people think about. And to get to the end of the day and say, I didn't have a conversation with anybody, is very eye-opening and somewhat depressing. So if you have too many of those days, that's not going to do you any good.
Greg, this is the new toxicity, is loneliness, right? Is that
Right.
you're following this, is that if I could go to every corner of the world and form, community and group, this is what everybody needs at any age. Being alone and fending for yourself, no matter what you're going through, really, really takes away from quality of life. And
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
unfortunately, I always say, here's the two things: there's loneliness and there's solitude. And when you're going through something and recovering, I understand what you're saying. You need that alone time, but not too much alone time. But you need other people to help you. And we're all not good at that. We're all not good at asking for help, and
Right.
nobody wants to roommate, and I always say, at some age, if,
Mm-hmm.
Golden Girls is my favorite model, as a couple of people getting together and living together and watching out for each other. That's going by the wayside, unfortunately. Greg, I know you do a lot of charity work related to colon cancer awareness, for the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, among other things. Please tell us what you have going on with that.
Right. Well, the biggest event I've got going up is coming up on May 1st. That is the Chicago Blue Hope Bash. And that is a very large event, that does raise money for both treatment and for awareness and so forth. They have another Blue Hope Bash in Washington, D.C. that takes place in the fall. I was fortunate enough to become a part of it last year, and this year I'm going to be the MC for it. So it's a combination of you've got survivors in there, you've got people in there who've lost loved ones. We but but what I really noticed about it when I became a part of it last year was how upbeat everybody was. There was a band playing. They wanted me to do a monologue. We did a speed giving round on
Okay.
our phones when I was out, basically just sort of
Yeah.
messing with
Yeah.
people and like get that, you can text, right? You just text numbers. How difficult is that type of thing? And when it was over, it was just such a wonderful moment for me, and I can't wait to be a part of it again. And you can read about that on the Colorectal Cancer Alliance website. And you don't have to live in Chicago. You don't have to attend it to give and to hear more about it. But it's going to be a beautiful evening.
How much, Greg, are you into or involving yourself in the science and the advances of care and screening? Is that something that you pay a lot of attention to?
I think I have decided that my role is more, again, making people laugh at their situation and letting people know that it's not the end of the world. I think I tend to leave the science part of it to the scientists and people like that. I have been asked now. I have been hired by several organizations at their sales meetings and so forth who are involved with cancer research, screening, that kind of thing, and they have asked me to come in, but they want me to come in because of my story a little bit, and they still want me to make their audience laugh. It's not up to me to stand up on stage and preach to them about what they are or not doing in the way of treatment and research. That's up to them. And everything I know that whatever anybody's doing is a good thing.
Right. And so the reason I asked that, because you're here to tell us your story, and you're a true role model for resilience, because you could have crawled up, pulled your blankets over your head and given up. And so there's something to be said for that in terms of recovery, that our attitudes towards our wellness and our attitudes towards our recovery and how we feel about our futures play a huge role in how well we recover. And, obviously, and then even if you fully recover, do you have a rich life afterwards? And you're showing us that you do. And there's things that that you still want to do. And that even in your 60s, you have a full, wonderful, rich life ahead of you, with hopefully many, many years to come. So when you're out and about in your day to day, and are you recognized by people as someone in this genre now?
Every now and then I get it. I was just
an
a couple of
identifying
months ago,
marker.
I was
Yeah,
just about a block away from my condo in Chicago, and I'm waiting at a stop sign, and some guy looks at me, goes, "Corporate comedian, huh?" He goes, "I follow you on Instagram." I go, "You do you?" I don't think I'm certainly not famous by any means, but about once or twice a year, I might get a look at an airport and like, "Didn't you speak at our sales meeting?" Back in 2019, that kind of thing. But no, I don't. I'm someone who's kind of flown under the radar for my whole career, but I found a niche, that being speaking for the business community, that very few comedians do or want to do, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
And is the corporate culture and community thriving right now, or are companies trying to get camaraderie among their employees and have meetings because I know that COVID drove a giant,
It did.
nuclear missile into that one. I mean,
yeah, and it changed the meetings industry forever.
Yeah.
It really did, because you can't just go from 100% remote to 0% remote.
Right.
You can't do it's not going to happen. I do think, though, and I touch on this in the book, in the final chapter, about how we lost the ability to connect with one another. We lost the ability of face-to-face communication. I'm especially seeing that in younger generations now. And I have developed a lot of material, not telling the Gen Z crowd, don't do it this way, it's their way, but kind of juxtaposing how they do things with how our generation does things. There's a lot of humor in there, but it's also sort of a gentle reminder that never getting out, as we just talked about, and just staying in your cocoon in your apartment and doing everything remotely is not a good thing. And because you're eventually going to have to find people who you might have to lean on at some point, and you can't do that. Likes and follows and thumbs up emojis and you're the best, you're going to be just fine. I'm sorry, that's not the same thing. So I think a lot of, to your question, I do think a lot of businesses are trying to, even though it's a slow process, they are trying to get back into some form of face-to-face communication, whether it is a yearly meeting or a conference, or getting back to having incentive trips and flying your top performers to Cabo, as opposed to giving them a check or a Peloton bike, which is what we gave everybody during COVID. And I think that's a good thing.
And are you experiencing any ageism at this point?
In terms of what?
Work?
I think I think about it all the time. I do. I sometimes know that I'm being judged not so much on my body of work, but how many Instagram followers I do or don't have. And that's bothersome a little bit for me, because I just did not start off in the age of social media. My daughters could set up Instagram account. They have Instagram accounts, and they would immediately in the first day probably have more followers than I've had in 10 years. But I also think that I have touched my story and kind of the way that I formulate my humor. A good example being making fun of the generational differences has kept me from being looked at as the old guy on the corporate circuit. Why do we want to hire this guy? Because he's older than maybe a third of our workforce. It shouldn't matter if I can make you laugh. And if I can add a message in there to tell you why it's so important to keep laughing, how it helped me, and how it can help you if you're willing to connect with one another and respect one another, respect everybody else's opinions on what is and isn't funny. Right. I think that's what we're dealing with more than ageism is people are trying to answer the question, what is funny? And I'm here to tell you there ain't no answer to that.
That's an excellent point, because everything can be funny, right?
Absolutely.
And we can have intergenerational humor.
We can.
And, I see the kids talking about the dad bod or the mom jeans, or the disparaging remarks made about parents. And, I always like to make that example. When we were growing up in television, the mother and father looked like the mother and father, and the kids look like the kids. Now you watch TV, you can't tell who's the mother, who's the daughter, the grandmother, right? The grandmothers are competing with the granddaughters over their genes or whatever it is. It's very, very interesting. Greg, tell us what you like about getting older.
Oh my gosh. Well, I like being told I don't look as old as I am. In fact, I wrote a joke about that. I said, I met this woman online because that's the way you meet people now after you're divorced, and there's a whole book in there. But I told her that when we met in person, she said, you're 63. She goes, from your picture, you looked about 51. And I said, that's a 12-year swing. That's huge. I go, you don't get compliments like that. I go, when you're 25, nobody says, I had you pegged for 13. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. So I like that. And I like the fact that I wake up every morning and feel like, okay, even if things hurt a little bit, I'm getting out there because, like we said earlier, there's a lot of life left to live. I like that.
And all the wisdom and the feeling good about yourself as you get older, there is actual, again, that's something that there's a little bit of evidence about, that as our bodies change, that we do become more relaxed about that, and we embrace what we've learned throughout our lifetime. And I think that every human being, when they step out the front door, is trying to prove themselves on some level. It's
a little bit.
That's
Yeah.
the world. You can't. I always my opening line always in all my speaking engagements, my books, is everything is stop caring what people think, but don't go into the supermarket in a bikini. Like you do
Right.
have to care about what people think to some degree. So it isn't that much of a blanket statement
Right.
because
Don't invite people to give their opinions.
because it's interesting to me when I hear people say, I don't care what anybody thinks of me. And I get that, to some degree, but also I think we do have to have some level of decorum left in us,
Yes.
right? As we get
Yes. Yeah.
older.
We all
Um,
care what people
yeah,
think of
we all
us
do
on some
care to
level.
some degree, that's for sure. Greg Schwem, I can't thank you enough for joining us here on It's Okay to Be Old. And for listeners, you can reach out to Greg at www.gregschwem.com.
Yeah.
Please look out for his Blue Bash and his speaking engagements and things coming up, because it's just not just the colorectal cancer awareness is important, but everything you're doing is to keep us healthy and happy
Right.
and laughing
Yeah.
forever and ever. So, we look forward to seeing you
Right.
in a lot of
And
different.
can I add one thing, Patricia?
Sure, of course.
This whole interview would
Mhm.
not have taken place if you and I did not take the time to talk to one another in that green room. And it would have been very
Absolutely.
easy, would have been very easy for us to just not do that. You're
That's
going to be on television. I'm going to be on television. We could have just been lost in our own world. We could have been watching the feed from the green room, and we both chose not to do that. And
exactly.
that to me is huge, and it's
That's
what I
that's
try to.
so profound, because I want to reach out to everybody, hear their stories, find out why we're there.
Yes.
And I think we were all talking to everybody in the green room.
Yeah.
Why are you here? Why are you here? And everybody's
Right.
stories was important and
Mhm.
extraordinary,
And
and,
different.
and has value and has different.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So thank you again so much, Greg, and look forward to seeing all your successes.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Great to see you
You
again.
too. And I want to thank all of you for listening to It's Okay to Be Old. Please tune in again for all of our engaging discussions on all things aging well. And for feedback and topic requests, you can reach me at www.patriciagreenberg.com. Stay well and stay safe, and we'll see you next time.